Hello, everyone, and welcome to Whale FM Makerspace Edition. In this show, we talk about everything and anything art and crypto in the NFT scene with designers and creators alike, otherwise known as non-fungible tokens. My guest today is Urs Fischer, the world's renowned creative whose signature style playfully juxtaposes subjects to dramatic effect. Now, the master sculptor is back with part 7 of his 3D series Chaos, a collision of everyday objects that explores our history and humanity. Urs, it's an honor and a privilege to have you join us and speak with the whale community once again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For anyone that didn't have an opportunity, Urs met with us about nearly a year ago. I want to say about 10 months ago at the onset of this project. And just for anybody that may not have had an opportunity to see that stream, could you just ground us a little bit on, who you are as an artist and your journey in the art world to where we are today?
Well, I'm somebody that since I'm a kid like visual things, and I just engage with anything I can by hands. And when computers came around, computers that I'm born many moons ago, and so it's just I like what I see and I like playing, and that led to me. I mean, automatically ending up being an artist, because that's the one place in the world where you can do that. So I think it was less a fantasy of being an artist and more like a natural way of engaging that leads to this. And at first that was, like you had local galleries or this and that, you look for an outlet or a place to share what you do. And over time, I mean, now we live in a very interesting time where there is a much bigger platform to share, where you don't need to function locally with the few people that are around you. So
Right, and what a journey it was. I think I saw that you initially had studied photography. You mentioned that you got your hands on whatever you could to experiment and just kind of found your lane, but always a creative by nature. Looking for different ways to do that. And so through the various years, was there a particular driving force to your creativity? Any major influences that kind of helped shape your vision and aesthetic to where you are now?
I think one thing I love is that everything we did as people, from the very beginning to now, it's all part of the same of one language. So you can tap into that language at any point you want in your life. So once you realize it's out there, and so many people made things for thousands of years, or the present or the future, you can tap into all of it, and it's all yours to use and all yours to communicate with. And I think so that's when I realized that you can tap in a huge network of creation, and you can just play with it rather than thinking you have to contribute to it. You just like immerse in it. That was the point where I kind of, I think, made a decision that this is what I want to do, or it empowered me in a way to join in, if that makes sense.
Right. I found it very striking. A lot of your work is juxtaposition of things in ways that you wouldn't traditionally think of it, from, a near melting bed to materials acting in ways that they wouldn't naturally. So does that process just come naturally to you? It's how you would envision things, or is that through kind of sitting down and experimenting, or, do you just let the pen and the sculpting happen?
You see, I think when we do things, we can use any part of our body. We can use our mind. We can use our intuition. Um, we can use what's on the outside. We can use what's on the inside. We can just so I try to always keep all channels open. At times, as we all have as humans, we have interest. 1 month it's this, and then we change in interest for whatever reason. And I just try to keep all channels open and follow that. So that eventually leads to a broader way of going about something. I see, usually you think of an artist as having one single voice or like a style or something. That is a possibility to go this way, but you can also just think, I want to have fun and join, and you don't need to achieve anything. It just happens along the way.
Yeah, I definitely get that from your work. There's a playfulness of it, right? Of you kind of experimenting and doing different things, and I think a lot of people really appreciate that. Was that always a part of your creative process and what you put forward, like from your first gallery showing to where you are now, or how has that evolved over time?
It keeps evolving. Like just now, what you have on the screen, all these clay sculptures on top, these top three images. That's, for example, that's kind of, if you think about it, it's like a real life metaverse, because that was over 4 weeks. I had all these volunteers come in Los Angeles for, and there was just an infinite amount of clay, as much as people could use up. And so there were about 1,500 people. They came over various days, so in the course of 4 weeks, to just do whatever they wanted in this giant space. That's, I don't know how big that is. It's like 60,000 square foot room, so it's very, very big. And so everybody just did whatever they wanted, and things started to break apart and other people added. So in some way, that's, I'm not really the author of this. I'm just like providing a platform, and I put some focal points. For example, that's an experience that makes art really interesting to me, because it starts to communicate in all directions rather than being a fetishized single object.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely saw some nuanced layers there with some experiential stuff as well, right? With the suspended raindrops, um, created a different aesthetic when you were looking at the bread house through it, et cetera, and things of that nature in some of your works. So let's talk about chaos. Obviously, you were on before to discuss the project at its launch a little bit. For anyone that didn't see that, could you give us a brief background on the project itself and
So
what you set out to do?
they're a multiple. So what you see right now on the screen is just a small part of basically the capstone piece of this
Right.
project, this 501, where you have all 1,000 objects kind of separate. But in order to build that up, I was always fascinated. When you think you're a human being, let's say, there is an idea of that you are yourself, your body, you're this, you're that. And if you engage with another human being, that space becomes kind of, you occupy somewhat the same space. Like, let's say in a relationship of any kind, if it's brief or in a family or in a personal level, you kind of get into each other's space, you know? So you're not like a solid entity, you kind of merge. And so in some way, like, I always liked objects. I mean, it's kind of like a fable, they're kind of stand-ins, the selection. So for this project, I thought I want to have 1,000 things, to tell a somewhat subconsciously informed encyclopedic story of people. Because I mean, objects, I see these objects all as shadows of people. Like, that's a hearing aid, my grandfather had one, and that's a thing from a champagne bottle top thing. So they're
Right.
like, I just try to find like a broad range of objects. A lot of it I have a personal relation to, or thoughts about, or an interest, a curiosity, and to tell kind of like a story. And in that story, you have a lot of little stories, and a lot of little stories is two things meeting. And when they meet and they converge, I mean, so just to quickly elaborate what we see here we see a rendering of something. In the actual NFTs we made, they're sculptures. So we have all the assets to make the three-dimensional thing are basically in the blockchain. um, because I think right now we're on a place where a lot of it seems a bit unclear where it's going to go with the virtual, the augmented, all of that. I think we're still very early days. I cannot also imagine that we will still look at phones and walk around like this in 10, 20 years from now. I think things will move and go somewhere where I don't know, where it's a little bit more satisfying an experience, like where it can be in longer. I think that's my issue when I go to virtual stuff. After a few hours, I'm kind of like, that's it.
Right.
So what I think we will get to a place where these are integrated. And the idea with this chaos stuff is that these are sculptures, and in a way, they're all based on um, they're all based on actual real world things. So we go through a very elaborate process of scanning. I kind of underestimated that a bit because we have very high ambition. So we use it's all like it's a metamorphosis of a real thing. I mean, kind of almost you could say like when you think of morons, Bird Banks, you like this kind of thing. One thing gets moves and takes on a virtual body, so to speak. So. Like that's a ring of somebody gave me this from a Super Bowl ring that was kind of wrong because this team didn't win, and that's a photo. It was prepared, but it was not, And the other one is like an old black and white photo of an American city after a hurricane. So which is always fascinating. Like for example, in this case, I thought this is a Houston based team, on the ring. And if you think of Houston as a city, was built after Galveston which was the first city by the Gulf, which was kind of eradicated by a hurricane. So they just moved the city in. So there are like many stories in each of these pairings.
Right. I think I heard, when you were speaking with us about a year ago about, you really appreciating the small details and the idiosyncrasies of objects and some different things. And, that was part of what elicited this interest in you, when you were younger, looking at a plate and its perfections and things like that. But I find it really intriguing that, these things carry stories in themselves, of course, right? The World Series ring, or the postcard here, but when they meet, it becomes something entirely different narrative, entirely different way to look at it. And you characterize this as them having their own moment. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but I think it's a beautiful thing that it's this new type of experience that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some way, like what you can do digitally. I mean, what I see like primarily, there is an amazing opportunity in anything virtual to use space and to use light, and you see that reflected in a lot of digital work where you can really like expand in many ways. So this doesn't really make use of any of that. This is really about like I mean, just to quickly elaborate this. So we have all the assets are in there because the way it's the white paper is lined out is you can basically make your own converging things. They can be very different. You can animate that in any way you want,
Right.
because I don't know how the future is going to look like. Also, we try to project some of them very large, and it becomes like kind of monumental. This little intimate thing becomes monumental. Right now, what you see in these renderings, a tiny thing is proportionally the same than a giant thing. If you see in that little rectangle you put in a car, it will take up the same space as a button. So there is no relation to size, and I think that's also like a digital one of the beautiful things about anything that is virtual, that is not in the real world. Like scale and all these things are relative in a way.
Now, is this an evolution of something that you had tried in the past in a physical way, right? Like trying
Oh
to
yes,
fuse sculptures together with saws out and really trying to mesh them?
I tried to do mashup for a long time, but it's a little bit difficult. Like with a saw, like you make two things and you try to cut them in a way and glue them together. And that was maybe 20 years ago. I started with that in a physical um, way, but it didn't really. It didn't really. I mean, it was interesting to do it, but it
Right.
has a total different feel.
And certainly different constraints and definitely with motion, right? Here you can do a lot more that you couldn't there, I'm sure. Did you set out with these juxtapositions in mind, or did you try different things and just saw what worked? Meaning the two
Well,
pieces that you would
this
pair?
whole thing. I mean, I didn't. I first photographed 1,000 objects, like still life, and then I had these 1,000 objects, and they didn't move, and I just tried to arrange them or individually, or like I just tried to figure out what that means, and it was frustrating because they didn't move. you want them to move. You know, you want each of these. You want to look at these things. You know, like you want to look at something and you're just curious. You want to look at it. So then I realized I need to kind of make them 3-dimensional, and that was before I understood that maybe, like, because you know the problem is I used computers for a long time, and but I'm not somebody that's coming out of an NFT art space. You know, I
Right.
come from a traditional art space, and anything that was digital was never seen as valid.
So
Nobody
one thing
cares.
that I
People like the impact of the imagery, but nobody cares about the actual. Nobody wants a link to a, or used to want a link, because there was no way to validate it, and so in some way that was just very natural progression.
One thing I do like about this is, sorry, this is Rune. I was a little late, unfortunately. But one thing I do like about this, and I'm kind of curious, looking at the image, the videos shown by Nightmare. Not only are you getting the objects, but you, like you said, you're looking for the motion, but the physics of the objects are what are baffling me in how you did this in a digital way. Because, like with a car seat, the straps are moving to the left if it's tilted to the left, or moving to the right if you're tilted to the right. And even the one with the hat with
The chain.
the sculpture, the chains moving just ever so slightly, but it's so natural how they're moving. Did you How did you manage to get that perspective
Well,
into these pieces?
well, that's all animated. You see, like the
Yeah,
movement within the pieces, we have to animate for this
yeah,
rendering. That's not, you know, we have like the objects are all like prepared to
yeah.
move, but you have to animate it because it's from a single point of view.
Exactly. That's
And
amazing.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You said people can take control of the digital assets, right? And so they have the ability to animate and manipulate these further in whatever the medium progresses to in the future. I can only imagine that capstone piece, which I'll love to talk about in a little bit, if they added collision to the physics and what could possibly happen there, right? A lot of interesting possibilities, but I did find it intriguing that you specifically did not want collision in this. You wanted them to intertwine and kind of rotate at the same time.
well, it's kind of open. I mean, all it says is that they are like in the pairs, that they are relative to each other, like in
Right.
size, the proportions. So it's not like, you know, you make something big or small. So to kind of maintain that, and that they are moving, and if possible converging, and then the rest is up to whoever makes whatever out of it. I mean, it's like you can, you know, I mean, I dream of holographic sculptures for a long time, you know. I mean, we
Right.
all grew up watching stuff, and that was normal, you know.
Right. That
And
gets me
I'm still like,
that
where
gets me
is that stuff?
excited for
I mean,
sure.
there are these big kind of refrigerating looking things that, you know, they don't have that, you know, all these people that travel and then they just materialize in front of you. We're still not there, you know.
Right. Someone wanted to know if these were rendered in Blender.
Yes, but so yeah, that's what we do. And but the objects, I mean, first I said everything is scanned and so on. So it's a lot of work before to
Right.
get this. I mean, I really I realized there is a gap. You know, a lot of virtual things or digital things you build from scratch, and the real things are the real things. So this kind of bridging is actually, there is not an easy way to do it. There is not. I mean, there's more and more tools for e-commerce, whatever, for a sneaker to quickly scan and have the colors to photogrammetry, but it is all pretty. You know, it smooths over a lot of details, let's say, which is totally like works, but this idea
Right.
of retaining everything, it's almost like preserving in some ways, like
Yeah. The detail is still there. So yeah, you're right. It's like preserving, like that one with the book, the golden bow. That it looks like a real book. You know what I mean? Just like one that's just there. So yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to some of the nuanced specifics of, this part 7 of chaos and the pieces that we have here. Has there been an evolution thematically, or is this just kind of
There are evolution. I mean, I have all 1,000 objects. Like I've selected each and every single one, and I also do the motion. I have like some VR headset, and we wrote some program where we can record, and all the animations are made by hand, basically.
right?
I can grab the objects and we can record that and so on. So it's very hands-on.
Oh,
But
that's amazing.
I for these drops with Makerspace, I try to just have somewhat a sub story to each one, but not like necessarily like here is your sub story. But sometimes they're more like faces or masks or figures or body parts or like things that relate more to the human body. Sometimes they're more like kind of objects. Some of them have more motion in the objects. And so these are just in this drop. So we have, I don't know what we want to start with.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up Pinky in just a moment. All right, we'll start with Conquest since it loaded first.
Well, that's a traditional Peruvian pot, this big kind of vessel. I don't know what traditionally was stored in them, but they're very decorated and handmade and have these faces. And the other object that's kind of like us, like kind of being like a moon to some kind of invasive moon going around that.
Right.
Pot is like a can of Budweiser, pretty generic object. And so there is many stories here. Like for me, like I like the handmadeness and the oldness of that pot, and I like the I always like industrial products. Like since I'm a kid, I ask myself, how do they get the soda in the can? Yeah.
Right.
How do you get that in there? Like, just and how does that machine look like? I actually looked into how these machines look. They have like it's like a disc of aluminum that gets with pressure comes up, and then the whole thing is under pressure, and then they needed to print this label. So I'm fascinated with these objects that you could never make a single can of beer by hand, or you would have to spend like tens of millions of dollars to make a single can of beer. So it only makes sense if you make like infinite amounts. And on the other hand, there is somebody like within a pattern of a traditional thing, and both were meant to hold some kind of to retain some kind of food. So it's just like these things interact, and if you see, I'm somebody that likes garbage. When I walk through, I love walking through cities, and I like looking at garbage because I'm sure we can say the environment is that, but it's a reminder of who we are really, and if you go around the world, the garbage starts to look pretty much the same wherever you go. It's like people use the same products, and in some ways, so that's also a juxtaposition of like something local or coming out of a local culture versus something global. It's like
What's great about it, it's funny that you said that I like garbage because actually garbage, and I'm going back to my archaeology class. I mean, looking at people's garbage or going through garbage, you could tell a lot about a culture. You could tell a lot about what was going on at the time, and I mean that's how archaeologists do it too. They can find out what food was consumed and stuff like that based on the garbage. And I put garbage in quotes.
I don't know if you're trying to make a statement about your beer preference here, Room, but I do appreciate in the description down here, it actually has the nutrition facts instead of the weight and whatnot of it. It's the nutrition facts of the beer.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I am a local craft beer guy.
All right, we'll let you slide now. So is this rhizome? Is that it?
Yeah. So that is just like you have two things. There is this kind of little plastic toy I found in a store. Like I don't know. I later found out it's like somewhere from mid '80s, and it just looked like it was so weird, like these meaty kind of wings of that bird with this hair. And I'm a dad, so I'm around a lot of toys. So I'm interested in that stuff. So, and then the other thing is changer. Like where I grew up, there was no changer really, and then that gradually became like available, because it doesn't grow there. And I always like changer is like this strange looking root. That thing grows on the ground. That thing is not, that has its elements it needs to be in is like under the ground. That's where it grows and lives. And I just always like how they look. They look like some kind of hand, and that's more like a visual. For me, that was more like a visual meeting. That doesn't have anything more than that.
Right.
It's just like a strange.
I'm mesmerized by the way the hair trails and as it goes through the ginger. It's very, very intriguing the way that these two things meld. Nostalgia.
I think this is one of my favorites. It's so simple. It looks like milk in a spoon.
Yeah, in the beginning, it's good. And then also, that thing of a silver spoon, like, just if we go into this, like, mini story for myself, like my own mini story of each object, that kind of silver spoon idea, like, I mean, also the saying, but these people, you got a silver, not too long ago, 50 years ago, people still maybe got a silver spoon for their Christmas and then a fork for their birthday. So you can build up your silverware. I mean, nobody cares anymore. This is like, it became not only irrelevant, it was really like undesirable. But this idea of like this silverware, and as a, people used to break in your house and steal your silverware. I mean, imagine.
Right. I got things in my basement from my wedding that have never been opened. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with those. Melt those into a sculpture at some point, perhaps.
Yeah. So that's kind of the silver spoon. And we don't, logically, since we have email, regular mail became somewhat irrelevant, and these were the envelopes they used for airmail. And I still remember those. So they had these envelopes that were, the paper was lighter, and there was a specific kind of paper you wrote on. That's for this airmail letters. It was also much lighter, so to save weight on the mail, they kind of flew across the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever. So there was always something. I mean, it is really crazy how like location is irrelevant at this point versus location used to be relevant. I mean, just because in some way, the way I see it, like the moment you had you could write a telegraph, or the moment you had a train, it's the moment we became faster by machines and electricity, like by an impulse, basically. And we are still, this is just a very elaborate version of that thing, where you transmit something faster than with a pigeon or by foot or going on horse and bringing a physical object. So in some way, there's just this thing about, like, there was a certain glamour to getting an envelope that looked like this. I don't know why it looks like that, but it's kind of a cool design.
It's true. I've actually subscribed to things, to magazines that I don't know that I don't know that I've actually read many of them, but I appreciated getting the magazine in the mail just to bring back some type of nostalgia, of excitement of actually, hey, I got this thing that I consider cool and it's mine. Just because that's lacking nowadays, right? Everything's digital. So I can definitely see a lot of the points that you brought up in this. And Harlequin.
Well, that has a diff. I mean, like a hammer and a nail. That's just like, that's a low hanging fruit. And in some way, I just like, while animate a lot of the other stuff, it's just, I have a fascination when they converge. And this was totally clear from the beginning. I take the hammer and the nail, and they just start playing with each other. Like this, basically, like the nail teases the hammer.
Right, it's chasing it.
I just imagine my thumb being there.
Yeah. So, and then like for all the titles, for example, Harlequin. That this is in the tradition. Like all the titles, I somewhat associate some whatever. I mean, things need to have a name. We all have a name. Everything has a name, and so the name of this is like this there is the Harlequin and Pierrot in the Commedia dell'arte. Like one is the sad sack, so to speak, and one is the mischievous, cheating, the kind of character that just kind of ignores everything and just gets his way. It's like a giver and a taker, somewhat.
Right. And not necessarily what I would have associated with the two pairings. So, although you may say low hanging fruit, maybe for your mind, for me, I wouldn't have put that together. So, really appreciate that. And now Pinky's up as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just like these two things. I grew up with a metronome, being in the household, and it's very fascinating. I mean, as is like most music, it kind of relates to a human heartbeat. All music, in some way, or the rhythmical thing. Like everything has a rhythm, everything has a waveform. Being our communication, everything works through a wave. Like your sound bites, their electrical impulses, everything is a wave. And in some way, I was always fascinated by these metronomes, and they kind of looked old. Like they looked old 40 years ago. They're still old. And the other thing is just a can of sparkling water. We have that always standing around, and just fun. These flavors they put in.
It's really cool because this looks like the can. Well, the can is crushed. Okay.
Yep, yeah, the texture on this is incredible. From the input that you obviously crafted with a lot of care to the execution, I find these to be impeccable. And then knowing people will have the digital files to be able to manipulate and carry into the future in other ways is really intriguing to see what people can do with it.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that. I mean, it takes a little bit of work to make something cool, but if it's, I would like to see like very different interpretations of this whole thing.
Right. So
the way I see it is, if we can one day do something holographically, if it's just like, or in any other whatever form we don't even know yet, if you can have that like in a city, it's somewhere. Maybe just for some people see it, others don't. But like, you can have these things being like dispersed in our life. And what's funny? If you say I select objects now in 2021, 2022. I mean, 2021 is when pretty much all of them were finalized. And in 10 years, even the newest thing we put in will be 10 years old. In 30 years, even the newest thing we put in will be old. So therefore, I started to introduce some older objects to not have like everything really dated. If it's all like now objects, it would feel old.
Right.
Like very specifically old in not long from now. I mean, you see with a car that's 10 years old looks kind of like, well, or a phone. I recently found the first iPhone. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
It's like this thick and small and weird, and it's like the screen is horrible, and
right. Same thing with me. I'd look old. That's why I'm in a digital avatar. I don't have the rock star looks like you, so I need to keep myself from being too dated. I did have a.
Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Room. Go ahead, Room.
No, I was just gonna say like the possibilities of different pieces just based on the randomness of objects, and even how their physics are intact, and the different rotations. I mean, it's amazing the possibilities that can come from this. So I definitely applaud you, because this is
thank you. There was a portrait of JR, a friend of mine. You see that? Like, was actually JR's hat. If you see that, like the one on the top left.
Oh yeah.
So I asked him for his hat and his glasses. And so we scanned that, and that's like, him as a street artist has that kind of disguise, that he always keeps.
Yeah. No, that's really cool.
I have a question. You mentioned your interest in holographic stuff and things of that nature. Will there be an evolution in style and medium for this project, or any plans for that down the road? I've seen you really integrate the environment that some of your installations have been in and where your works are. So, with NFTs, there's opportunities for AR and VR stuff that could integrate both. Any plans to expand in that realm or explore it?
Yeah, I'm just not satisfied with the quality of it all. I mean, that's what I meant earlier. When if you engage with it longer, I'm lacking. I'm lacking detail. You know, we live in a time where every phone is 4K screen or 6K, whatever. Like you used to have like a really high resolution where you don't see the pixels anymore. You know, I think we just passed that threshold like a bunch of years ago for consumer goods where we don't see the pixels, you know, and in some way, it then it starts to feel like natural how it flows, that these two worlds flow together. And I mean, I work now a lot of, as I said, the animation I do it in the VR, but it's still like it's a little bit. I get the satisfaction out of the possibility, but I don't get the satisfaction in the longer term of engaging in it. Like, I mean, I would love this. I would love it wouldn't be a flat rendering. Yeah, exactly.
I can totally see this as an AR thing where people could go to a physical space and hold up their phone or a camera and see, the holographic image into a place as well. I think this will translate to a lot of different deliverables. So, like you said, keen to see how people experiment with it. I had a question for you relative to the NFT space. You were first getting involved when we spoke to you about a year ago. You have nearly 10, 11 months under your belt now, and we're at up to number 120 in the Chaos Project. How has your foray into NFTs confirmed your expectations, and how has it diverged from what your expectations were?
Well, let's put it like this. I mean, one thing I I think it's in my from my point of view, it still is unfolding, you know, and it's not clear how it will unfold. What we did see is like, you know, coming from a traditional art place, you know, I'm really not, you know, I'm old school in some way, but it's like I a lot of NFTs. I mean, what I saw is like, you know, since the currency is kind of built in, or the trading collection aspect rather than like some aesthetic values. With aesthetic, I don't even mean visual, like an aesthetic value of a philosophical question or whatever, of a thought process, or of a also visual. I or an experience. I see the majority of what I see where it develops is like just a lot of trading, you know, of beautiful graphics and visuals and ideas. But and then, you know, I think a lot about, I mean, generative art. The concept of generative art starts probably somewhere in the 60s, you know, with when programming started. And I think there are really a lot of promises. I wish it was like it was a little crazier. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. We talk all the time here at Whale. We were an organization that kind of stood up as the NFT movement was coming together as a community. So we had people with crazy ideas kind of talking about it and experimenting. And some of our discussion recently is, with the influx of liquidity and people being able to participate, a lot of people were drawn to, you know, pictures that they could flip quickly. They had a different objective in getting involved, right? And so it made a lot of people hop in to create something for that purpose and get away from the experimentation. But really at the root of it, that's what it was, right? It was punk rock, it was rock and roll, it was using this technology to do something different with art and experiment. And so, we try to carry that message forward and make sure people understand that that's what it's about, in addition to everything else. It's not just profile pictures and trying to flip. It's really trying to make your mark and being able to express in different ways.
Yeah, and I mean there is. I mean, I stumble across all kind of things, but I mean, what I do think that some of the radicality you find in the beginning of it all, before there was an economy around. I mean, not to lament about it, but it seems to be like there is a real question, and the question also creates a platform for what you said, like for a lot of different things, like collectibles and other ways and other images to share, but I mean, you can do any. What's cool about the working with computers, you can do anything. I mean, I do understand like a lot of the generative stuff. What I see, I love the conceptual idea of the generative thing, that it doesn't have a static nature, and that it continuously like shifts and explores, almost like a mutation of a body or of a cell or of a protein, whatever, like of your DNA. And it just like it kind of reflects life in some way. And the way, I mean, some of it is because the data is limited, what you can put in a blockchain. So in an NFT, you cannot do too much. But a lot of it, I see structures. I see visualized structures, and structures are amazing because nature is structure. Our bodies are structures and all. And in the structure, there is almost, when you sometimes see that swap over, like some NFT artists, you see when they swap over into a non-virtual world, it becomes closer to architecture, or it interlinks with architecture. When it gets projected or whatever on buildings or this, there seems to be something there, which I think is interesting. I think that's one of the new, the motion of space and architecture, like how that kind of converges. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that there's a lot of experimentation to be had for that particular angle as well. That's yet to be explored, and I look forward to seeing what people do with it. I think, one of the things that you do is have physical interruptions to the space, like disrupting the experience paradigm for people when they see art sometimes. And I know you like to leverage illusionary techniques sometimes. What opportunities do you see to do that with NFTs?
I don't know yet. I wouldn't really know.
Well, you would be one of the people I would think would do something mind-blowing at some point in the near future. So I'll be keeping a keen eye to see what you possibly experiment with there. But kind of in a similar realm, I've heard you talk about really enjoying the reaction from people to your art, and that really being something that you really value. What have you gleaned from people's reactions to your NFTs?
You know what's interesting? There is some kind of there's this people that pick up on the ASMR qualities that these things have.
Yes, definitely.
And that's definitely like a very different audience than like your regular contemporary art, whatever, audience. I'm sure there is overlap, but still, like, what I enjoy with, I mean, like all these, whatever is not in a physical place. I mean, even a show now. Look, let's say you have a real artwork, like an old school, I mean, a real artwork, like a physical, like let's say you have a little painting somewhere. It will be some place, physical place in the world, in a storage on the wall, in a museum, in a home, whatever, in an attic. And if you see it now, 99% of people that see any artwork, they see it on their phone anyway. That's the reality. Nobody goes, most things you just see virtually. So to your question, that there is a much bigger way of sharing anything, and there's also much bigger possibility to share any information, and with its pros and its cons, because less is left to your imagination the more you see.
Well, that actually ties into something that someone had asked in the audience, which is, do you consider the sound of these objects interacting with each other? Is that something that's taken into account at all?
No.
Okay.
What is? I
Well, I was
like
just
the
looking at a
idea.
kitchen. I was looking at a kitchen faucet right here, and a violin. So when the person asked that question, I was like, "Oh, that's pretty interesting," because now I can hear a kitchen faucet going and a violin going.
Yeah.
Well, Rune, this is the opportunity for you to work on your, your sound curation skills here and score this piece for Urs and start putting it together. I'd
That'd be
love
some
to hear
crazy
it.
ASMR. That'd be some crazy ASMR.
We've talked a couple of times about a traditional art piece, and I'm interested, coming from where you do and your accolades worldwide. How have you seen the traditional art establishment react to NFTs, and has that moved over the past year since you launched this project?
I mean, the traditional art world just kind of woke up when Christie sold the work from people for that much money. All of a sudden, they were all ears.
Right.
And leading to half a year later, whatever, in Miami, Basel, everybody's an NFT specialist. It was very quick. And I think a lot of the more traditional art thing, this gatekeeping kind of art thing, like traditional art market, traditional set of art, like physical art. I think they don't like it much on average. Nobody knows what it is, they say it's too early. We don't know. We don't know if it's of any relevance, and then this who knows? I mean, you just got to. I I think a lot of younger people totally see this as a way of communicating, but I think in an older set it's difficult. That's my experience.
Right. I heard you in your last interview talk about you were speaking with a friend and he really didn't get it, digital. And then your daughter came in excited about a skin from a video game or something. And then it kind of all clicked and made sense. So it's great to hear that you kind of were able to have both perspectives as influences for you. Speaking of the metaverse, I know you've touched on kind of where the technology is right now as far as how things can be portrayed, et cetera. But I've also heard you talk about experience and connection validating reality for people. What are your thoughts on the metaverse as it's been characterized? Because some people say that could be different things, but its potential future for art and for yours in particular.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not knowledgeable. What I do know is I saw the internet in the beginning, and I saw what happened to the internet. How it became like from a wild open place, it got kind of shaped. At least the surface of it got shaped by corporations, and I just hope that's not gonna happen. And I think
Yeah,
as soon that happens, it's like let's say Instagram creativity. I think creativity to me is there where you don't know how to get from A to B, and you try to get from A to B, so you have to come up with something. Maybe you need to invent a car or an airplane, whatever, like just to say, or build a bridge or something you didn't know before. In a way, if you say Instagram like creativity, you have the same shape. Like for a long time, you have the same shape, and the way you express yourself is in that same shape. So that's kind of limited in some way because you have to put it into that cupcake, cupcake form.
right.
So you put something in, but then you can put a different color on it or a different whatever. But it's kind of guided. It's not messy. It doesn't. You cannot shred it apart, and that's what I like about NFTs. I mean, there is the possibility to do whatever you want. And I hope that back to your metaverse question, that the experiences will be such. And I do think, like at the moment, things that I see that have been put in there, they still function like they're still hung like a painting on a wall or like a sculpture in a room. I think there's not it could be very different experiences in my. I hope like that. It's more maybe a crazy experience you can have rather than like the
Right.
same in the meet space in the virtual. That's kind of what I
Right.
wish.
Yeah, and back to your point about making sure the experimentation and the ethos of why this movement started kind of holds true, right? There's plenty of people that advocate for the democratization of art and the removal of gatekeepers, and we need to do our part to preserve that and not just hand everything over to whatever big corporate entity wants to enter the space. So appreciate you having that perspective as well. One of the
Yeah,
things
and
we
I
saw
think one
over.
way to
Oh, go ahead.
validate that is like in the traditional art thing. One way that gets validated, I think, some early NFTs to see them really to understand them as historical, uh, like important moments, and to kind of if the market reflects that rather than, I mean, these things should be valued like above everything else.
Yeah, and it is, and we have artists that were native crypto artists only. They didn't come from the traditional art world that are considered highlights of the movement, alongside some giants that did come from the traditional art world. So I think we formed our own culture here, and that has value. And kind of in line with that, we've seen the power of community in this NFT movement over the past year really grow, and people come to understand how that can leverage. And I know that you talk about engagement really shaping art, people's experiences with the art kind of shapes it. um any thoughts on that, and first of all, how it can be used? And I know, like, you showed an example of people coming in and helping you mold clay. Is there a possibility at some point to have some interactive project where you can envision you working on NFTs and having community part of it?
Possibly. I don't know. It sounds good.
Yeah,
I like your thinking. I didn't go there in my mind.
I'm planting some seeds so we can come back in our next interview next year, and then we'll be able to harvest a little bit. You mentioned here about gatekeeping and making sure we keep the authenticity. And I think that one thing about our community that was being discussed when we knew this interview was coming up is people really appreciate that you kind of come from that vantage point naturally, that you were about experimentation and about having that engagement directly with people that want to experience art and the collectors. And I think that's why your work really resonates with the NFT community, because I'll tell you, we've had some people that have come into this movement, and some that we've even interviewed here, that have come from the contemporary art world, and it they feel like whatever they had done there should just translate to here, and that people should just run and flock to their work. There was no authenticity in it, and people have commented continuously that that's what they get from you, that you're authentic, you're experimenting, and they appreciate that from what you provide and what you create.
Yeah, I mean that's the sad thing. I mean, a lot of moves I saw from you know it's too much a blanket statement, but I did see some moves that just look like a money grab from well-known artists from the physical space, and that's kind of a little sad, to me.
Right, especially with so much opportunity to experiment and take things in places that you can't, with the limitations of what you can do physically.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if you look, for example, like one thing I have a hard time understanding. I mean, it became a look. It became a look like Andy Warhol's look became a look for every poster to have like a black and white face on a black outline on a color background, let's say. I mean, if you think of like, for example, CryptoPunks, how it's the programming, supposedly from what I know, made a lot of these configurations. There is a certain logic to what you see. It's inherent in its DNA that it has that look. But by now everything looks like that. So it becomes just like a style, you know, and it's and that's and then you see like you see some artists from contemporary art space like just adopting whatever they do in some kind of style, and I don't understand why they would do that, you know.
Right. But like you said, from day one, you wanted to get your hands on what you could to manipulate and experiment. And here we are. So glad that you're here experimenting in the space, and we're excited to see what will come. I'm excited to see what the culmination of this is, quite honestly. When we get to 501, I can't imagine the chaos, I think appropriately named, that will be there, but let alone what someone could do with it, with having all those files.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean for now we probably will show it on some point in the screen. So because we have so much detail that it will not live on a computer screen. So I plan on this fall showing it on a 40-foot long screen. That's I don't know how tall.
That's amazing. Can't wait.
Like it's so you can see everything in its full size, in all its details at the same time. And we try to you know, there's a lot to learn of how they move, don't move, if they bring themselves into some kind of order or not. And
Yeah, really looking forward to some physical installations that'll integrate your NFTs as well. Are any of those in scope for the near future besides that wall that you mentioned?
yeah, I had this one. Yeah, there is a thing I'm working on. I'm collecting started to collect the screens. So I you know, the kind of the same thing as these objects are from all different times to that we collect screens from all different times from and then display all these pieces at the same time in all kind of you know, how many phones get thrown away every day. You don't even need to get new screens. You can just find any, you know, in a car dashboard to show it like in any possible
Right.
way, you know. So that's one project.
I did want to ask how you had a picture of Rune's phone up here, which was an iPhone potato merging, which is what it sounds like he's on every time we talk. Really
No.
looking forward. Yeah, really looking forward to those physical installations. Before I forget, I got some exciting news that you actually had stood up a community Discord.
Oh yes, yeah.
Right. So I'm going to share that in our community stream text now as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to explain. So we have, logically for this project, I have a lot of people helping me, and we scan the stuff in my studio and so on. But then, like, we work with a lot of talent, you know, to do all the legwork for that. And so we have a Discord channel. That's our work channel where we share all kind of imagery in all stages, the objects in different stages, and you know, sometimes we also throw in other kind of imagery just for fun. So. That is what our Discord channel is. You see all these things while you just see the imagery of that we share every day about all of these things in various stages and you know, and the communication around it.
So a real inside look into the making and progression of this project. Super cool. I can't wait to hop in there. Again, we've shared that into stream text. We'll share that on the Twitter feed as well, where it's actually showing this stream live, as well as on our Twitch, so people that are interested can join and then see all the very cool experimentation that I'm sure is to come as this project continues to progress. So again, I believe it's tomorrow that this drops live on Makerspace, correct? I think so.
Yes,
It's part 7 of Chaos goes live on Makerspace tomorrow for anyone that is interested. Likewise, you can hop into the Discord and be up on all of the moving and shaking going on with this amazing project. Urs, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. Really intrigued by everything you do and can't wait to see how this continues to progress.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Best of luck in your drop tomorrow. Have a good one.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good one.
Have a good day.